Stephen Bates from the London Guardian. I wonder if I could ask Archbishop Rowan whether he's learnt anything new that he didn't know before about the opinions and the balance of opinions in the House of Bishops here and about the position of the Episcopal Church, and if so, what it was.
The answer, I think, is yes. I've had a much clearer understanding, not only of issues around the polity, the structure of the Episcopal Church, but some of the assumptions that many bishops make about the theological basis of the Church itself and of its polity. People have spoken to me quite a bit about the significance of the baptismal covenant as a basic concept for the Episcopal Church. I think I've got a richer sense of how that works and why it has perhaps made it easier for some here to come to the conclusions they've come to than might have been the case elsewhere in the world.
Michael Paulson from the Boston Globe. Archbishop Williams, what would you say to Episcopalians who at this point wonder why not just let the Anglican communion split? What's the point of keeping together two groups that have such clearly different views on such important issues?
I think it would be rather an admission of defeat if we said that we were incapable of working together on the issues that divide us. Whether we'll get to that point, I don't know. I have to say, God forbid, and mean it. But the importance of it is that the need that we have for each other is very deep. I think that came across yesterday in much of the discussion, the first session we had with the bishops of the House. Many spoke of their awareness of the need that they have for Christian communities elsewhere in the world, not least in the so-called third world, or two-thirds world. A need to understand something about the experience, not only of poverty and privation in those areas, but the experience of young churches finding their way into mission. Likewise, I think the churches elsewhere in the world need the experiences of the older churches, and for these purposes, rather unusually, the church in the United States is an older church, and they tell me the Church of England is an even older one still. So I don't want us to get to an admission of defeat very quickly on that. I think we do learn from each other.
John Gibson, Voice of Integrity, Integrity USA. Your Grace. Stephen Bates said in his column, asked a question in his column last week, why would a gay person want to be a Christian? What word of hope for the journey do you have for the gay and lesbian baptized?
I hope that a gay or lesbian person would want to be a Christian because they saw in the Christian gospel both affirmation and challenge, both the acknowledgement that they as children of God had a place with everybody else, and the questions that are given to all Christians. And the questions that are posed to all Christians of what the appropriate kinds of life are that show forth God's glory. That's why the gay one would want to be a Christian. What word of hope have I at the moment? I hope very much that we are, how should I put this, we're clarifying the belief that's been expressed in a number of Rowan conferences, in a number of primatial statements, our belief in the unacceptability of prejudice, discrimination, and violence against gay and lesbian people. I think that's actually become a little bit clearer, although that clarification has been at the cost of other unacceptable views becoming more audible as well. I want to say that very strongly. I think that's a consistent theme in recent years. Certainly, that gay and lesbian people have a place as baptized members of the body of Christ is not in doubt here. The disputes that divide us have been about two issues, I think: the appropriate limits of pastoral response and the eligibility of people who've chosen a certain style of life for office in the church. Those debates ought not to be, though sadly they often feel like it, about the dignity, the civil dignity, the right, the baptismal right of gay and lesbian people.
Neela Banerjee from the New York Times. Archbishop, the address that the Primate Neonese gave to the House of Bishops today has made it onto one of the blogs, and we've had a chance to read it, and it states in very clear terms, at least what some primates expect from the Episcopal Church. And what I wanted to ask was how reflective that the Primate Anis's message is of what came out of Dar es Salaam, and the issue of compromise. If there's a discussion about compromise on the American side as far as the response to Dar es Salaam, do you, Archbishop, sense room for compromise among the requests or the demands on the Dar es Salaam side? I guess that's the question, room for compromise on the Dar es Salaam side.
First of all, I think if you want to know what the primates corporately thought, meant, and said, the Dar es Salaam communique is the place to start. Some primates would, I think, give a more robust interpretation of the demands, some less. That's the nature of a communique. We found the form of words that we could all agree to as a suggestion of what would need to be clarified from the Episcopal Church for some of the breaches to be healed. So it's inevitably a matter of compromise. It's been presented, sadly, as a matter of a set of demands and indeed intrusions and impositions. I don't think that was what was in the primate's mind. In fact, I'm pretty sure it wasn't. And that means that we are inevitably in the business of compromise. What is brought out before us will be something which will have to be scrutinized, thought about, reflected on, digested. It will take a bit of time. So I think it would be a mistake to see the 3 or 4 proposals from Dar es Salaam as questions that need to be answered so strictly in the terms in which they were posed that there's no room for manoeuvre at all. What we need to know, I think we've been able to clarify in the last couple of days, and I think we're some way towards that clarification.
My name is Mary Ailes. I'm with Good News Magazine, and I'm a member of Truro Church in Fairfax. My question has to do with one of the things that we've heard often from the Episcopal leadership is that we are free to go, but we have to leave the buildings behind. And how that often comes across to someone like me is, we have no need of you, but we have need of your building. What would you say, Your Grace, to those of us who are wanting to remain Anglican, but cannot at this time in good conscience remain Episcopalian? What would you say?
2 things. First, I would say, start by looking for arrangements and situations within what's there, because the grace of God is given even through very, very imperfect organizations. And even if you think the Episcopal Church is a hopelessly imperfect organization, like many others, the question I would want to ask is, but isn't God's grace still given sacramentally there? Isn't that presence active? So I'd be rather slower than I think some of your friends have been to look for solutions elsewhere. I've said more than once, and I think the primates earlier this year said very clearly, that it is distressing to see the levels of litigation that the Church is getting enmeshed in. I would still hope and pray that there's a possibility of some way around that doesn't involve us as Christians in dragging each other disedifyingly through the courts for the next 10 years, and I would say that equally across the board to those involved in dispute.